them figure themselves out. But don't let that process become your pain story. When you learn to respond with groundedness instead of desperation, you reclaim control, not over them, but over you. You stop trying to manage their perception and start managing your own peace. You stop looking for confirmation in their words and start finding certainty in your boundaries. You start showing up for yourself the way you once hoped someone else would. There's a moment in every connection that feels like a turning point. You were talking, sharing, laughing, building something, and then quietly something shifts. They start pulling away. Fewer texts, less enthusiasm. The space between you starts to grow, and your heart races to fill the silence with meaning. Did I do something wrong? Did they lose interest? Is it over? But pulling away doesn't always mean it's over. Sometimes the person you're connecting with is facing something you can't see. Maybe it's fear of vulnerability. Maybe it's a past they haven't healed from. Maybe it's pressure from work, family expectations, or even their own internal self-doubt. People pull away not always because they want out, but because they don't know how to stay in while holding all of their own weight. They retreat, not to abandon you, but to figure themselves out. And yet, your mind starts writing stories. You assume the worst. You replay every interaction. You dissect every text. You search for clues of disinterest, of detachment, of endings. But here's the truth. Distance isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just space that someone needs to breathe, to regroup, to confront their own fears of closeness. And that space, that silence, it's not the villain, it's just a signal, a pause, not a period. When someone pulls away, it's tempting to panic, to fill the silence with effort, to send more messages, initiate more conversations, try harder to be seen, noticed, wanted. But what if I told you that this is the most important moment, not for chasing, but for choosing yourself, choosing your peace, choosing to stay grounded in your worth, regardless of someone else's emotional distance. Because here's what most people miss. How someone pulls away says a lot, but how you respond speaks even louder. Do you collapse under the weight of uncertainty? Do you overextend to keep the connection alive at the cost of your dignity? Or do you pause, step back, and allow them to move through their moment while you stand strong in yours? People often come back, not because you chased them, but because you didn't. Do you say to yourself, because you respected their space, because you didn't try to control what they were going through, because you honored your own time and energy instead of proving you were worth staying for? Pulling away isn't always the closing chapter. It's often just a pause in the paragraph. It can be the space between growth and reconnection. People need room to feel their feelings, to question what they want, to miss you. And none of that can happen if you're constantly in their inbox, trying to rescue something that might not be broken at all. Let them go if they need to, but don't make their silence your story. Don't take their distance as a reflection of your inadequacy. Some people pull away because they're overwhelmed by how much they feel. Some retreat because they've never known what healthy closeness feels like. Some pull away because they are testing their independence, or they're silently fighting a war inside that has nothing to do with you. What matters is not just what they do, but what you believe in that moment. Do you believe that your worth is tied to their response, or do you hold steady, knowing that anyone who truly sees your value will come back, not because you begged, but because you never had to? This is not a game. It's emotional maturity. It's knowing that every connection goes through phases, and sometimes Space is the bridge, not the barrier. You don't lose people by giving them space. You lose them by losing yourself while they're gone. There's a moment in connection when silence starts to echo louder than words. You were talking regularly, sharing little parts of your day, maybe even planning things together. And then suddenly, without warning, the energy shifts. You feel it. The replies are slower. The tone feels distant. The warmth you once felt has cooled. And your instinct might scream at you. They're pulling away. Something's wrong. It must be over. But what if it isn't? What if their silence isn't an exit, but a pause? What if they're not leaving? You're just watching them process. This is the part most people misunderstand. Withdrawal doesn't always mean disconnection. Sometimes people pull back not because they're done, but because they're overwhelmed. They're sorting through thoughts they don't know how to say out loud. They're battling with doubts that have more to do with themselves than with you. They're not walking away, they're walking inward. You might not see the inner storm, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Some people aren't good at verbalizing when they feel overwhelmed. Others were never taught that emotions can coexist with communication. And for many, the only way they've learned to cope with stress or emotional confusion is silence. It's important not to take this personally. Not every quiet moment is a rejection. Sometimes people go silent because they don't want to say something they'll regret. Sometimes they pull away because they're trying to figure out if they can trust their feelings or if their fears are louder than their desire. And sometimes people withdraw because they care and it scares them. But here's what you need to know. Just because someone is silent doesn't mean you need to fill the gap. Your job isn't to fix their distance. It's not your role to convince them of your worth while they process theirs. Because the truth is, emotional processing is a solo act. You can't do it for them. And if you try, you lose yourself trying to carry a weight that was never yours to hold. There's a deeper kind of strength in letting someone take the space they need without panicking, without assuming the worst, without rearranging your piece just to hold on to something that might not be lost. People process differently. Some talk it out, some shut down. Some need time to reconnect with themselves before they can reconnect with anyone else. And that's not a reflection of your value. That's a reflection of their capacity. You can't control when someone goes silent, but you can control how you interpret it. Instead of spiraling into anxiety, instead of chasing clarity in places where none is being offered, try this. Pause with them. Don't abandon yourself in the silence. Don't confuse their stillness with rejection. Stand still. Breathe. Let them feel what they need to feel. Let them move through their process. This isn't about waiting around or shrinking yourself to fit their journey. This is about understanding that emotional withdrawal is not always a red flag. It can be a reflection of someone working through their emotional landscape in a way that isn't linear or perfect. Some people need to lose themselves a little to come back stronger. Some people step away to find perspective. And sometimes the space they take becomes the clarity they needed to move forward, not away. You won't always get a clean explanation. You won't always get closure in real time. But don't let their pause become your identity. Don't write a story of abandonment when it might just be a chapter of reflection. Silence isn't always the sound of leaving. Sometimes it's the sound of someone finally hearing their own thoughts. And yes, it's hard. It's hard not to overthink, not to assume. But this is where emotional confidence lives, not in controlling what others do, but in controlling how we respond. You get to choose whether you internalize their distance or hold your own ground. You get to decide whether their pause becomes your panic or your permission to keep living, growing, and trusting that the right people don't leave, they return when they're ready to connect for real. When someone starts to pull away, there's a part of you that wants to run after them. Not because you're desperate, not because you don't have value, but because something inside you wants to fix it, explain it, close the gap before it becomes permanent. You remember the connection, the laughter, the chemistry, and you want to protect it before it slips through your fingers. That instinct to chase is human. But chasing rarely gives you what you're truly after. When you chase, you place yourself in a position where your value becomes conditional. You subtly send the message that the other person is the prize, and you're hoping to be chosen. You start negotiating with your self-worth. You wonder if you should say less, ask for less, expect less, just to keep them from walking further away. You start editing yourself for approval, hoping they'll notice, hoping they'll return. But the moment you begin to chase, you give up something more important than their attention. You give up your standard. Your standard is the quiet voice that says, I know who I am. I know what I bring. I know what I deserve. It's the inner boundary that doesn't shift just because someone seems emotionally unavailable or distant. When you hold your standard, you send a message. You are free to go, but I will not lower my worth to make staying easier for you. There's something incredibly powerful about the person who doesn't chase. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they're cold or indifferent. It's that they've learned something life-changing. Real connection can't be forced. The right people don't need to be chased. They don't need to be convinced. They don't need to be pulled closer by effort that isn't matched. The right people feel your energy and meet it. The wrong ones drain it and expect you to carry the emotional load. And sometimes that realization is painful, especially if you've already invested your heart, especially if you saw potential. But holding your standard means understanding this. Connection doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from alignment. If someone isn't ready, isn't showing up, isn't making space for you, that's not a cue to try harder. It's a cue to observe more clearly. You deserve a relationship where effort flows both ways, where communication isn't a guessing game, where showing up is the norm, not the exception. But you only attract that when you stand firm in your value, not when you chase validation. And here's the paradox. When you stop chasing, people often come back. Not because you manipulated them with silence, but because they finally see what life looks like without your energy wrapped around them. Your absence speaks louder than forced words. Your peace becomes louder than your pleas. Your silence becomes a mirror, showing them what they risked losing. But more importantly, you come back to yourself. You reconnect with your power. You remember that love isn't proven by how far you'll bend or how much you'll sacrifice to stay close. It's proven by how much you're willing to protect your peace, even when your heart is tempted to do the opposite. People test boundaries not always consciously, but emotionally. If they feel you'll stay no matter how little they show up, they'll stop showing up. If they know you're willing to chase, they'll keep walking, expecting you to follow. But when you stop, when you pause, when you breathe, when you take a step back and reclaim your space, you create emotional gravity. Not neediness, not pressure, just gravity. The more and more you breathe, women get taken. The more and more you fight for their boundaries. to gravitate, a grounded sense of value that either pulls the right person toward you or repels the wrong one completely. Holding your standard isn't about ego. It's not about games. It's about inner alignment. It's about being so rooted in who you are that you refuse to lose yourself trying to keep someone else interested. It's about knowing that love built on chasing is always fragile, and love built on mutual effort is the only kind worth keeping. You can't control when someone pulls away. You can't always stop the silence. You don't get to choose when someone decides to create space or when their energy shifts without explanation. But you always have control over how you respond to it. And that response is where your real power lives. When someone grows distant, your mind may start spinning. You look for patterns. You replay conversations. You obsess over the why. You might think, was I too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Should I have been more laid back, less available? But those questions don't bring peace. They bring self-doubt. And self-doubt is exactly what steals your strength. You don't find your value in someone else's attention. You find it in how you carry yourself when that attention disappears. Because the moment someone creates emotional distance, you're faced with a choice. Do I chase or do I anchor myself? Do I shrink or do I stand tall in my self-respect? Do I try to earn love or do I remember that love that's real doesn't need to be earned through fear or performance? Your response doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It can be subtle, calm, confident. You don't need to post about how unbothered you are. You don't need to throw up walls or fake detachment. You simply need to return your focus inward because that's where your emotional power regenerates. It's easy to react when someone pulls away. It's easy to send that extra message, to ask what's wrong, to try to bring clarity through effort. But strength isn't always in reaction. It's in restraint. It's in pausing. It's in letting the silence speak for itself without rushing to fill it. Because sometimes the space you give someone reveals far more than the words they would have given you. How you respond tells the world what you believe about yourself. If you scramble to hold on to someone who's drifting, you tell yourself that you're only valuable when someone else validates you. But if you hold steady, if you stay centered, even when someone else becomes uncertain, you're making a powerful statement. I am still whole, even without your reassurance. And that's magnetic. That's attractive. That's what builds emotional gravity. You're not weak for feeling the pull to fix it. You're not flawed for wanting things to return to how they were. That's normal. But what separates those who grow from those who stay stuck is the ability to sit with discomfort rather than reacting from it. Your response is where your growth lives. It's where your healing starts. It's where you begin to rise instead of retreat. This is the moment where your emotional blueprint evolves. You learn to regulate yourself rather than being regulated by someone else's actions. You learn to soothe your mind instead of feeding its fears. You realize that closure is a luxury, not a guarantee. And self-respect is something you never bargain with, even in confusion. Letting someone pull away without losing yourself is one of the hardest things you'll do, but it's also one of the most transformative. It teaches you to separate your identity from someone else's behavior. It teaches you to detach with grace. It shows you that your emotional resilience is stronger than your need for clarity. Because the reality is, most people are not testing you on purpose. They're navigating their own chaos, their own emotional messiness. And sometimes they don't know how to take you with them. And that's okay. Let them have their space. Let them